Welcome to GCSE LitVerse. Today we're answering a question that may appear in the AQA exam. Compare how poets present ideas about the power of society in London and one other poem of your choice. We'll model the comparisons you need in your essays, switching between my poem, Tissue, and the speaker from London. Cities are built by people, but people rarely control the cities they create. Rules shape streets, institutions shape lives. Power decides who suffers and who benefits. Two poets look at society and ask the same question: who really holds the power? Let's find out.
Initially, Blake presents society as controlled by powerful authoritarian institutions, where even nature is regulated and divided for economic benefit. Whereas Dharker highlights that although society appears structured and controlled through systems symbolized by paper, these structures are fragile and capable of change. Blake writes, "Chartered street, chartered Thames." The repetition of chartered suggests ownership and regulation. Even the natural river Thames is controlled and divided by legal authority. This implies that society is dominated by institutions that prioritize power and profit over freedom. This creates a feeling of restriction. The reader senses that every part of the city, even nature, is trapped within systems of control. Blake was writing during the Industrial Revolution, when economic power and government authority heavily shaped urban life. His poem criticizes a society where institutions dominate both people and the environment.
However, Dharker presents society very differently. Rather than portraying society as permanently oppressive, she suggests that the systems controlling our lives are temporary human constructions that can change over time. Dharker writes, "Paper that lets the light shine through, this is what could alter things." Here, paper symbolizes the documents that organize society: laws, maps, records, and systems of authority. However, the idea that paper lets the light shine through suggests that these structures are not solid or permanent. Unlike Blake's rigidly controlled city, Dharker implies that society is fragile and permeable, meaning the systems that govern people's lives are capable of transformation. This creates a feeling of cautious hope. The imagery of light suggests clarity and possibility, encouraging the reader to imagine a society where restrictive systems could be exposed and reformed. Dharker's purpose is to remind readers that social structures are created by humans and therefore can be reshaped by them. Whereas Blake presents institutions as oppressive and entrenched, Dharker suggests that society is far less permanent and therefore capable of change.
Both poets show that society shapes people's lives. However, Blake presents society as psychologically imprisoning individuals, whereas Dharker suggests that society's influence can be reshaped through human imagination. Blake describes mind-forged manacles. This metaphor suggests that society's rules and expectations imprison people mentally as well as physically. The word forged implies that these restrictions are constructed by human systems. This creates a feeling of suffocation. The reader senses how deeply social control has infiltrated the minds of individuals. Blake criticized the institutions of his time, particularly the church, monarchy, and government, which he believed restricted freedom and reinforced inequality.
In contrast, Dharker highlights how human actions and everyday life shape society. Dharker writes, "Fine slips from grocery shops might fly our lives like paper kites." Here, ordinary receipts symbolize the small records that shape modern life. The simile of paper kites suggests that human lives are guided, but also capable of movement and change. This creates a feeling of lightness and possibility. Unlike Blake's oppressive imagery, Dharker presents society as something that can shift direction. Dharker reflects on how modern life is structured through paperwork and systems, yet she emphasizes the human capacity to reshape these structures.
Ultimately, Blake ends the poem on a bleak note, where society is left helpless against the dictatorial powers of a few, whereas Dharker highlights how fragile society is and how easily its structures can change with time. Blake writes, "How the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear." This disturbing image shows the destructive consequences of social corruption. The suffering of both the prostitute and the child symbolizes how society's failures damage future generations. This creates despair. The reader sees a society trapped in cycles of suffering and injustice. Blake condemns the moral and social hypocrisy of 18th century London, suggesting that institutional power has corrupted society entirely.
However, Dharker offers a very different perspective on the future of society. Rather than presenting society as permanently trapped within oppressive systems, she suggests that human structures are fragile and constantly shifting. Dharker imagines, if buildings were paper, see how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Here, the metaphor of buildings becoming paper symbolizes the institutions and structures that organize society, governments, laws, and systems of authority. By comparing them to paper, Dharker emphasizes how fragile these structures truly are. Unlike Blake's rigid and oppressive society, these systems can collapse or transform with even the slightest change, suggested by the delicate imagery of a sigh or a shift in the wind. This suggests that the power of society is not fixed or permanent, but constantly evolving. This creates a reflective sense of perspective rather than despair. The reader begins to see society as something temporary, powerful, but never unchangeable. Dharker ultimately reminds readers that social systems are created by humans and therefore can be reshaped by them. Where Blake's poem ends in a bleak vision of institutional dominance, Dharker encourages readers to recognize that the structures controlling society are fragile and subject to change over time.
If you want a grade 9, don't just analyze quotes. Compare perspectives, compare emotions, compare purpose, and show the examiner you understand the true power of society.